What an exciting game. I was not expecting it to end the way that it did. This is game number 3 in the World Championship between Ding Liren from China, Gukesh Dommaraju from India. Let's go ahead and jump in. Just to remind you, Ding won the first game, drew the next one, so he has 1.5 out of 2. Gukesh has zero point 0.5 out of 2 going into this round. Gukesh is playing with white. He plays d4. So last game he played e4. Now we see d4, mixing it up a little bit. Knight to f6, knight to f3, and we get the queen's pawns out there in the center, and c4. This is called the queen's gambit, when you give up this pawn temporarily if black wants to take it. Ding did not. He plays what's called the queen's gambit declined. Okay, you say, no thanks, I'm not interested. I'll just defend my pawn so that I can recapture. This is a very solid choice. There's nothing wrong with taking it, but it's just kind of a matter of preference. And then we get what's called the exchange variation, where white says, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and trade these pawns right away. And there are reasons why you might want to do this, because when black has the option to kind of constantly capture this pawn, you always have to be thinking about it. You know, it's always kind of in the back of your mind. Now, these guys aren't really thinking, so don't get me wrong here. They're still playing opening preparation, but that's one of the ideas. Like, you just relieve that tension. You open up the C file, you can start making use of that. It does come with the drawback. When you trade these pawns, you let out black's bishop, right? And that's usually a bad bishop stuck behind the pawns, but now it's not. And so it's you know, just kind of a matter of preference, right? What do you prefer? So knight to c3, c6 stops any knight b5 moves, defends the d5 pawn, and Gukesh plays the move queen c2. Now queen c2 is a nice square for the queen for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're controlling this diagonal and you're actually stopping black from putting their bishop there, which would be a nice diagonal for the bishop to go on. And then also you're on the c file, so that could be useful in the future as well, okay? g6 is played. Now g6 is a multi-purpose move because we just talked about this f5 square. Well, now you're defending it with a pawn. So if you want to play bishop f5, you can. And you're also fianchettoing your bishop. You could put it over here and kind of line up towards the center, okay? h3. Now, right around this moment, if you watch the time of Ding, this is where he kind of starts to think. Now, this h3 move, I think, has been played some. Let me check the Explorer here. Yeah, it's been played a few times, but it's really not very common. So this is kind of where we start to get into uncharted territories. The more common approach would be bishop g5. And I don't really know the theory, but that's what most of the strong grandmasters play. So h3, a bit of a surprise move here. And you'll notice Ding starts to think. He thinks a little bit there, decides to go ahead and bring the bishop out, attacks the queen. White plays queen b3, which attacks the pawn. And so Ding defends that with queen to b6. And there's obviously the option for a queen trade. If white did this, which he did not in the game, yes, you get the doubled pawns, but you do open up this rook, which is kind of nice from black's perspective. So what did Gukesh do instead? He plays the move g4. And this is really where Ding started thinking a lot, this kind of section of the game. And I guess this was surprising. Maybe he didn't expect this. Maybe he just was trying to remember. I don't really know, but he started to spend a lot of time. Okay, obviously the bishop is under attack. He doesn't move the bishop right away. He first goes with the in-between move. This is called a Zwischenzug, when you play kind of an unexpected move before you do something else that's expected, right? So when your bishop's attacked, you would expect, oh, he's going to move the bishop, but no, you play the Zwischenzug, you capture first, and then you move it. Now, why did he do that? Well, he does create double isolated pawns, and if you have studied pawn structures, you'll know this is a weakness. These are generally not good pawns. They can't defend each other. Sometimes they get in the way of each other. Not ideal. He does get the open A file, and there's more going on in the position than just these two pawns, which we're going to see, but that could be a weakness. And actually, Ding plays bishop c2. And he's like, well, I got to move my bishop anyway. I'll just go here and attack this pawn. Okay? Now, if you see me looking down at any point during this game, I actually made some notes of like critical moments that I wanted to talk to you guys about so I don't miss anything. So let me just make sure. Yeah, okay, so let's keep going. So bishop to f4 is played. And Ding plays the move h5. Now, I have a question for you guys watching this. Why do you think he didn't just take the pawn? I mean, that's kind of the point, right? He went here to attack the pawn. It looks like a free pawn. Why not just take it? Why does he play h5 instead? Well, if you had a chance to think about that, let me actually just show you. If you take the pawn, white is going to play the move knight to d2, attacks your bishop. And if you go here, I'm going to take you. And then I'm going to probably play either e3 or e4, and I'm going to get my pawn back. And actually, let me show you that. It almost looks like maybe you could defend this, but there's a couple of really nice moves. You could even just start by doing this. Knight takes b5. And you say, wait a second, why are we giving up our knight? Because look at this diagonal. Look at that rook in the corner. Bishop g2 actually traps the rook. And you lost a knight, but you're going to get a free rook. And there's nothing that the black can do to stop you. Okay, so nice little tactic there. Let me just go back and remind you, that was when we attacked the bishop if they went here. So you might say, well, what if he just goes back to c2? He got his pawn, now he just goes back. Watch this. Rook to c1 attacks the bishop, and where's the bishop going to go? Here? No. Here? No. Here? No. Anywhere that you try to move the bishop to is actually covered by the white pieces, except e4. This looks like a safe square because you've got to defend it. But then white simply plays f3. The bishop is totally trapped. You can't go anywhere, and you're just losing a piece. So, just to remind you, that was going back to this position when Ding did not take the pawn. Now you can see why, right? He didn't want his bishop to get trapped, okay? So he plays instead the move h5. Gukesh plays rook g1. Now this is interesting because by doing this, he allows Ding to trade, which he does, and gain control of the file. And again, we've talked about these controlling the file in previous games, but generally you don't want to do this. Generally, you don't want to allow your opponent to have full control over a file with the rook, because look, white can't go there now because the rook would just take him and he's controlling all these squares. So why did he do that? Well, the answer is he's focusing more on this bishop than he is on the h file. He doesn't really care about the h file. Like, yes, black has control, but you can't really go there. You can't go there. You can't go there. You can't go there. You can't go there. All of these squares are controlled. So he's not going to invade on the h file right now. But what he's doing by having his pawn on g4 is taking away the square from this bishop, and he's actually going to focus on that, believe it or not, okay? So Ding plays knight here. We get knight to d2, and notice what knight to d2 does in relation to the bishop. It stops bishop takes b3, and he's clearing the way for f3 if he needs it, which guess what? It's going to take away all of the squares from the bishop. Okay, this is kind of a key thing that's going on in this position. So what does Ding do about this? He plays the move rook to g8. Now, I would invite you guys at home, you kind of know what the idea is, like the bishop's maybe going to get trapped, but how does rook g8 help his bishop? Well, the answer is this. If white were to play rook to c1 right now and attack the bishop, he's going to play the move g5. And notice the rook supports the pawn so that he can play g5 and attack the bishop. So now if you take the bishop here, he takes here, it's just a trade. His bishop doesn't get trapped, it's just a trade, the game goes on. If you try to move your bishop away, let's just say you move it back somewhere, then the bishop can go somewhere safely. Let's just say here, and you're fine. You've created these spaces that your bishop can go to, okay? So that was the idea behind playing the move rook to g8. All right, let's keep going. So Gukesh says, no, I don't want to allow that. And he plays the move g5. He stops this pawn from moving forward, and he does it with the tempo on the knight, which makes sense, right? So Ding goes knight to h5 and attacks the bishop again with the tempo so that white doesn't have time to come over here and like try to trap his bishop, right? He's putting the pressure on the bishop. So the bishop retreats. And now he plays a good move, but it's kind of a funny move, unless you're understanding what was going on in the position. He goes rook h8. And so he moved his rook here to threaten g5, which was important because his bishop was going to get trapped. White stopped that. And so now he's like, well, I don't want my rook sitting here doing nothing. Let's put it on the open file. And at the same time, he's attacking this bishop indirectly. Okay? So you might be wondering, well, can't white now just go and trap the bishop? Let's just say rook to c1. What's going to happen? Watch this. Bishop to f5. Because when he pushed this pawn forward, you no longer control the f5 square. So it doesn't work anymore. So that's why Ding's like, all right, no big deal. I'll just get my rook on the open file. Okay? Let's keep going. And let me see. What is my... Yeah, okay. I didn't get to the next part of my notes yet. So white plays f3. He goes knight to g7. And by the way, f3... Well, I don't want to say this. f3 is actually threatening something very sneaky. But we'll talk about that in just a second. So he plays knight to g7. Unleashes the rook. Attacks the bishop. Okay, so Gukesh moves the bishop, and you'll notice, even though he gave control of the file, like I said before, he's got most of these squares covered by his pieces, so the rook can't really invade too many places. That being said, he can invade one square, and that's what Ding plays. He plays the move rook to h5. Now, I want to point out a couple things here. Number one, look at Ding's time. Okay, he has 31 minutes left. Gukesh has an hour and 23 minutes. And a lot of this time was spent after the surprise of h3, g4. So let me actually jump back. This is important detail in this game. That's why I'm taking the time to explain this. Okay, so let's go back to around this moment in the game. If you look at the time here, Gukesh has not even used a minute. Okay, he's not even used a single minute. He's been playing every move instantly. Ding has already spent 15 minutes. And then over the next couple of moves, look at the time. He's down 30 minutes. And then around here, look at that. He spends another over 30 minutes, okay, to play this move. And Gukesh is at an hour and 56 minutes. So the surprise opening preparation by Gukesh really put him in a good situation in this game. Okay, now let's keep going. So back to the game, g5, he attacks, he plays f3, he moves the knight, attacks the bishop, bishop moves out of the way. Okay, this is where we're at. So right here, Ding plays the move rook to h5. Rook to h5 is actually a blunder. Now, if you guys would like to pause, why do you think it's a blunder? You might be able to figure it out based on what I already explained about the position, but why do you think this is a bad move? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, if you said it's because the bishop is going to get trapped, you are correct. And the way that it gets trapped is with the move e4. And this is what Gukesh played. Remember, the bishop's safe square was f5, right? After this pawn couldn't move forward, you didn't have those squares back there, but you weren't controlling here, you had bishop f5. But now e4 blocks the bishop from getting to f5. And guess what? You can't take this, it's defended. You can't go here, it's controlled. You can't move anywhere. And white's about to go rook c1 and take your bishop and say, thank you very much, that's a free piece. So this was why rook to h5 was a bad move. Now, that being said, you will notice that the eval bar is not like totally white. And by the way, you guys can look over on the left side of the board if you didn't know that. That bar will change from white to black, and it's not that much white. It's a little bit more white. But there are actually some interesting things that can happen here that can kind of keep Ding in the game. Now, he didn't play the best option. He decided to trade the pawn. Stockfish says, no, just leave the pawn and play knight to e6. Now, what does knight to e6 do? Well, you're attacking on d4. Why does that matter? Because when the rook attacks your bishop, you grab a pawn for free, and at the same time, you defend your bishop. But you say, okay, but white's just going to play bishop f2 and attack my knight and make my knight move. Now what? Well, you can actually play this move, bishop to c5. And the idea is that when white tries to take your knight so that they can grab your bishop over here, look what your bishop is attacking, the rook on g1. You're actually in good shape here. You take the rook. So they're not going to be able to do that. They have to play instead something else. So for example, let me see, what actually is the move I was looking at here? Instead of taking, you play rook g2. You get your rook away from that attack. And now we would have something like this. Bishop to d3. It's a piece sacrifice. Watch, this Stockfish is crazy, by the way. It's a piece sacrifice so that you can go rook to h1 check and launch an attack on white's king. Watch this. Bishop to f1. The other knight jumps in. You're threatening here. You're threatening, here and here. This is crazy. King d1, knight to d3. This bishop is pinned, so you can't take my knight because the rook's involved. I don't know what's going on here, but apparently Stockfish says black has a lot of compensation even though they're down a piece. Okay, so this would have been Ding's best try. Okay, he chose a different option. So let's go back to the game. And instead of playing knight to e6, like we just looked at and jumping in with the knight and going down that path, he decided to trade the pawns first. Now, there's one reason. There is one reason why this was not as good of a decision. And we're going to see that in just a second. And maybe he missed one move, right? And, you know, I say he blundered when he played rook h5 and got his bishop trapped. It's possible that he actually saw a lot of this. He was planning on letting his bishop get trapped because he thought he was going to get enough pawns for it and just missed one little detail. So let's just keep going and see what happens. So he plays knight to e6 now. Again, similar idea, attacking the pawn on d4. Gukesh goes with rook c1, attacks the bishop. He takes it, defending. We get bishop f2, kind of what I showed you before, attacking the knight. And here, bishop c5 was a better move. And instead, he chose bishop g7. Now, he was getting a little bit low on time, right? Because at this point in the game, he's got 21 minutes. He's only on move 22. He has to get to move 40 remember the time, there's no bonus time until you get to move 40. So he's got to make like 18 more moves in 21 minutes, and that's a lot of moves. So he plays bishop g7, a slight inaccuracy. It was a little bit better to put the bishop on c5 to defend. But there's only one move here for white. And if Gukesh doesn't play it, Ding has a really nice position, okay? And like, for example, if you take, we already kind of looked at this, the bishop comes in, your rook has a problem, and this is actually okay for black. Let's take a look. Somehow the bishop sacrifices here. Yeah, there's the fork. There's a fork here at the end, and after the rook moves somewhere, you get a third pawn, okay? So look at the situation. You still lost the bishop if you're black, but you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against 2. So you have 3 pawns for a piece, which is not bad. That's actually even material, and Stockfish just says it's equal, right? So that is maybe what Ding thought was going to happen, right? That's a very logical conclusion to come to, but he missed one move, and Gukesh found it, knight to e2. Why is knight to e2 such a great move? Because the knight is defending the bishop, and now you are not giving the option of black to recapture with the bishop and hit your rook, because you're attacking it twice. Like, for example, if they just try to defend this knight, that doesn't do anything. You just take, and then you take again, and then the bishop is hanging at the end of everything, right? So, knight to e2, critical move that Gukesh finds. Okay, let me see what else I want to talk about here. Okay, let's keep going. So he takes, sorry, that's not what happened in the game. Back to the game. So knight e2 is played. Okay. Ding goes for knight takes b3, and he does get 2 pawns for the piece, but not 3. So he loses the bishop, and then he trades on d2. Now, Gukesh needs to take this with either the rook or the king. What do you think is the best move, and why? If you had a chance to look at that, the best move is king takes d2, and that's what he played in the game. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, at the end of the game, when pieces are traded, queens are off the board, you know, pieces start getting traded, the king is a very important piece. You want to activate your king, and generally speaking, you want to head towards the center of the board so that your king can go wherever it needs to help defend pieces, attack pieces, control important squares, you know, whatever. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is if you take with the rook, I want you to pay attention to this and this and this. What do you notice about those pieces? Well, if a knight were to be here, that would be a triple fork, right? And guess what? There's a knight right here which can go to e5, which is threatening to come to f3. And you might say, okay, but can't we just like play bishop g2 and defend that? The answer is no, because bishop g2, you lose this pawn. That's one thing. You say, okay, can't I just go, let's say, rook g3 to defend it like this? You can, but watch this. Rook takes g5, an amazing tactic. And the idea is that after you take, boom, the knight jumps in and you get the rook back for free. And again, we see the situation where black has 3 pawns for the piece, and Stockfish thinks it's relatively equal, and black probably has good chances to draw this game. Okay, so critical moment here, and actually taking with the king was an important detail, and Gukesh plays it. So he takes with the king. All right. Knight to e5 is played by Ding. Knight to e4. Rook comes over to pin the knight. Gukesh sidesteps the pin. And, you know, even though he's ahead a piece for 2 pawns, this is not an easy position for Gukesh to win. Like, there's no clear and obvious, like, oh, well, I'm just going to do this and take this pawn and get a queen and win the game. Like, no, like, it's somehow, yeah, you can maybe make progress, but how, right? It's not easy. Black has this active rook. He's got this rook, which is becoming pretty active. His knight is a monster there in the center of the board. He's got all these annoying pawns. Like, it's not that simple. Okay, brings the rook in, invades some more. He plays bishop g2. And at this point in the game, what you'll notice is we are on move 28, and Ding has 13 minutes left. Okay, that means he has to make roughly 1 move per minute. Okay, he's got to get to move 40 before his time runs out. There's no bonus time. That is very, very fast. Okay, and as the game goes on, he's just thinking a lot, right? He thinks for 2 minutes there, which is not really sticking with that 1 move per minute time. And then right here, he thinks for another, what is that, like three minutes? Not sticking with that time. Rook moves back. And right now, nothing major is happening. They're kind of just making these random moves to sort of improve their position. White's still trying to figure out, like, how am I going to win this? And Ding's like, I don't really have much to do. Let me just make some random moves. King to e7. Rook to d1. And look at Ding's Ding's time here. And look at this. He thinks for almost 5 minutes when he only has 6 minutes on the clock to play king e8. He didn't know what to do. And there was a moment from the last World Championship where Ding kind of froze when he was playing against Nepo in one of the games, where I don't know if he actually lost on time or he froze and then had to just blitz out to move, but he kind of just like didn't move. It was like, dude, your time, you got to move. That's what was happening here. You could see it in his face. He was unsure like what to do. He's kind of stressed out by the position. Understandably, it's not a good position. There's like no really good moves, but sometimes you just have to force yourself to move. He spends a lot of time here. And he goes here. Now, you might say, okay, we're on move 31. He's got to make 9 moves in 2 minutes. I mean, that's not that many, right? These guys play bullet games where they play like a whole game in a minute. Surely this should be fine, right? There's a couple things you need to remember. Number one, this is not an online blitz game. You cannot pre-move pieces, okay? That's the first thing. You have to actually physically move it and hit the clock, which usually takes a couple of seconds every move. That's the first thing. The other thing is, when you're playing a bullet game, both players are low on time. So both players have to make these quick decisions, and blunders are made by both sides usually pretty equally. And you get in kind of a rhythm of like, okay, he moves fast and I move fast, and he moves fast and I move fast. And it's like back and forth, back and forth. That is not the situation here because Gukesh has 18 minutes. So he can just stop and sit there and think for 3 or 4 minutes before he makes a move. And that does 2 things. Number one, he's not going to blunder something. He's going to make better moves. And number 2, it messes up that rhythm, right? That back and forth bullet rhythm of like, boom, 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 boom. No. Ding just has to sit there and wait and wait and wait. And then it's like, oh, it's my turn. Okay. Like, what am I going to do, right? Very, very difficult situation to be in. Okay. And I just want to point that out because I think a lot of people don't like realize how much pressure you put yourself in when you get so low and you don't make the moves in time. All right. So bishop to g3 attacks his rook. He does play this move very quickly, which is good. And there's a moment here where it almost seems like maybe he's going to hold on, but the time was just too much. He trades the knight and then he brings the bishop to d4. Rook goes to h1. And look at this. Look at this. He's got to make 5 more moves. This is move 35. He's got to make 5 more moves. He only has a minute. He thinks down to 9 seconds on the clock. You can't do that. You can't do that. Now, to be fair, it's a losing position, okay? And white was probably going to win regardless. However, you don't know what's going to happen. If you make it to move 40, maybe you come up with some sort of a fortress where you can set up your pieces in a certain way that white can't bust through. I mean, it's not going to be that easy. Yes, he has the extra piece, but his pawns are kind of scattered. I don't know. I mean, anyway, he finally takes the pawn with 9 seconds. Bishop to h3. He plays f5. This was a good move, by the way, attacking the bishop. He's got to watch out for all sorts of things. Like where do you move your rook to, right? Because if you move it here, you know, there's potentially a skewer. You can't move here. You can't move here. If you move it away, your bishop's under attack. So he plays f5 with a few seconds on the clock. Bishop to f4, attacks the rook. He moves here, and I don't think he actually got his hand to the clock. He lost on time right here. Ding loses on time. Now, to be fair, this was a losing move anyway. There's a really nice tactic here that white had to finish off the game. Bishop takes f5, and you say, wait a second, why are we giving up our bishop for free? Oh, because the rook is going to get captured in that situation. And if you're black and you try to throw in this trade first, white says, no thanks, I'll take you first, then I'll take your rook, and white just ends up up a clear rook. And if you do anything else, like try to move this rook somewhere, well, you're just going to get forked right here. So he was losing position anyway, but he actually lost on time. Tough game for Ding. He had a great position going back to the move when he played rook h5. If his bishop didn't get trapped on c2, who knows what was going to happen. He had a great position. But for Gukesh, this is exactly what he needed. He comes back. He ties the match. It is now 1.5 to 1.5. We are going into a rest day tomorrow. So there's no game tomorrow. There's going to be a video where I teach you some endgame stuff. So make sure you watch that. But there's no World Championship round. Exciting stuff, guys. This was a great game, and I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you in round 4, which is in the day after tomorrow. Thank you, guys. As always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.